All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's get started. So here you are, your first class, most of you, for a degree in the information field. We're going to prepare you for information professions. You're going to go out, you're going to get jobs, you're going to be really rich, you're going to be happy, happy, happy. Yay! And all of it depends on knowing what is the information field. So that means that this is the most important lecture of your entire master's degree. No pressure on me whatsoever. All right, so what is information? Well, one of the classic, let's see, one of these. There we go. Here's the classic definition. This is the one that you're going to read in lots and lots of articles and papers. This is one you're going to hear about, and it's by a fellow by the name of Shannon and another fellow by the name of Weaver, who came up, and they originally going to call this the theory of everything, but instead they decided to call it information theory, or the theory of information. And it goes like this. What is information? Well, what we have is we have some sort of sender that has a message that they want to send. All right? So that could be someone with an idea, that could be someone with a document, that could be a person with a letter, something that they want to transmit, and they want to transmit it to a receiver, someone who's going to take and utilize that message. And so they're going to transmit that message, which usually means it has to be encoded in some form, written down in English, whatever, put into binary, know what the format is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that information is then sent over a channel where it is received. Once again, could just be your ears, could be your eyes, could be your computer, could be something. And this channel is the means by which we transmit it. And that channel will always have some level of noise going on. All right? And so noise can be literally static on the phone. It can be the wonderful cell phone calls that we get where it's like, yeah, I assume I'm going to agree with whatever you just said because I really didn't hear what you said. It can be a lot of different noise. For example, in this room, Ian talked about wanting the microphone because that nice little warble sound can get even louder when the air conditioning kicks in. It can be distractions. It can be the fact that you just don't want to be here. It could be lots of different stuff, but there's noise. And once again, this is broken down. Okay. And that at some point, whoops, take that. So in review, channel, noise, feedback. And there we go back again. Anyway, that you'd think I could handle a button. You know, after Marta telling me, you know, I'm so technical I can't even hit the right button. All right, some feedback. Can you hear me now? Did this happen, right? So this is the classic sense. And then people can study the transmission, and we can study channel, and one can build the idea that, for example, in the wireless world, the channels are defined by spectrum and radio spectrum, and we can talk about how those are allocated. We can talk about the advantages and disadvantages of it. For example, my telecom friends out there, anyone heard of LTE? LTE is? Sort of 4G, right? It's the next. We have 3G. We had 2G before that. We never had 1G, but that's what we had. Now we're getting to 4G, which is just faster, better, awesomer, cost a heck of a lot more, rip you off from a telecom company technology. And it's great, except that it turns out that there's a great chance it's going to interfere with your GPS signals. So you can either find out where you're going and not drive off the road or talk to your friend. So it takes that texting thing to a whole new level. Right? Not only do you not know where you're going because you're texting, but now your car doesn't either. All right. So lots of noise. We can talk about the policy. How do we set that? What's the space between it? We can talk about who's that receiver, the transmission, etc. Now, this is interesting. And so one would argue that what information is that thing that is being transmitted. Give you another way that people break this down. Goes something like this. Out in the world, we are deluged with data. Data, 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 data. Right? Ones and zeros flinging itself around the world, analog signals, lots of data. That data, there is a proportion of it that will be turned into information. It's a hierarchy. So the idea is, this is lots of stuff which doesn't have a lot of context. It doesn't mean a heck of a lot. If you're way back when in the days of modem, it's that wonderful, it's like, right? You go back far enough, you could actually whistle that, but that's a whole different world, right? But when it begins to get context, when you begin to say, oh, that's a picture, oh, that's a word, oh, then it becomes information. And then, just so you know, we move from information to knowledge, and knowledge to wisdom, right? And you can see we go from lots of stuff is data, some of that's information, very few of it turns to knowledge, and good luck on wisdom. Right? Some people take the word wisdom and they turn it into action. But this is, I've heard this called Graham's taxonomy. It's another way of looking at information. And we know from this data world that there's a lot of it. So this was a study done in 2007 talking about the amount of information in the world. Researchers calculate that humankind is able to store at least 295 exabytes of information. What's an exabyte, you might be asking yourself? You get a bit. 8 bits make a byte. 1,024 bytes make a kilobyte, unless you're Apple and you want to make your hard drive seem bigger, in which case you just round it to 1,000. Not just Apple. Lots of people do it. Anyway, 1,024 kilobytes is a megabyte. 1,024 megabytes is a gigabyte. All right, extra credit. Gigabyte goes to terabyte. Terabyte goes to petabyte. Petabyte goes to exabyte. Now, for the real extra credit, exabyte goes to zettabyte. And zettabyte goes to, I'm not making this up, yottabytes. Have your data. Right? By the way, if you just represent the world as text, 1 exabyte can store every word ever spoken by man, like since ugh, pterodactyl. All right? So there's a lot of this crap out there, right? 2002 could be considered the beginning of the digital age. The first year worldwide digital storage capacity overtook analog capacity. In 2007, 5 years later, 94% of our present memory is in digital form, recorded information. In 2007, we successfully sent 1.9 zettabytes of information through broadcast technology such as television, GPS, equivalent to a person reading 174 newspapers every day. By the way, methodology of this, they included things like if you were playing a video game, every frame of the video game. If you're watching television, every frame of television. So it's not literally just words coming through there that you're interpreting. Two-way communications technology, such as cell phones, humankind shared 65 exabytes of information through telecommunication, equivalent of 6 newspapers every day. And in 2007, all general-purpose computers in the world computed at 6.4 times 10 to the 18th instructions per second, in the same general order of magnitude as the number of impulses executed by a single human brain. That's right, we still win. Of course, what was it computing? Doing these instructions by hand would take 2,200 times the period since the Big Bang. So we know that there's lots of information, right? It's digital information. We know there's a lot of information. See, we see the word information all throughout here. Well, here is the trick. No one knows the answer to this. I could make this the interactive part where I make you flail a little bit trying to come up with this, but I'm just going to give you the answer. We don't know the answer. What one person considers information, another person considers data. What one person considers data, another person considers knowledge, and it doesn't work nice and neatly. We have about 45 full-time faculty. If you asked 45 full-time faculty what is information, you would get 53 different answers. Dave D would give you 80 of them. But so, you know, bye. Have a good time. Glad you're part of a school. We have no clue why we named it information, but, you know, we know there's a lot of it. This is why it's okay not to know what information is. Because if you notice what was happening on this previous graph, they were actually using information in really different ways, right? The 295 exabytes of information, we're able to store that. Well, if it's stored, it stores as ones and zeros. That means data, right? They're able to store that much data. And if you look here about the idea of we successfully sent zettabytes of information, does that mean that people read and interpreted and saw the context of all of that? No, it's impossible. So here we're talking about data, but over here we start talking about in telecommunications where people are talking. But we're kind of guessing that that certainly fits Shannon and Weaver's idea. So this idea that information is a malleable form. You're taking notes. Are the notes information? You had to read a book. Is the book information? Is it only when I talk about it that it's information? Heard a great discussion of higher education. They said the pursuit of higher education is to transfer the professor's notes to the student's notes without passing a brain in between, right? So where's the information here? Is it what's new and novel? That's one definition of information. If you hear something that's new, that's information. If you hear something you already know, maybe it's confirmatory information, but it's sort of static, right? The sky is blue. Yay, right? It's the no-duh information, definition of information. So why is it okay for me to get up here and tell you that it's all right not to know what information is? That this is a plastic, fluid concept. Some people treat information like water. Some people treat it like books. Some people treat it like a conversation. Because at the center of any field, of any discipline, of any profession is a great question. At the center of physics is the question about how does the physical world operate? At the center of the humanities, how do we think? How do we know? Why are we here? At the center of every great field is a great question, not a great answer. If we knew what the answer is, you wouldn't be entering into a profession, you would be entering into a trade. We wouldn't be talking about education, we would talk about training. And we wouldn't be talking about professionals, we would be talking about workers. At the master's levels in particular, the reason we make you go through scholarship and talk about scholarly communications and scholar that is because we don't know the answers. And you don't know the answers. The faculty have a little bit more experience, expertise, and tools about investigating the question, about helping you think about the question, about finding ways in which we can impact and what we do know about that question, but that question remains. And by entering this field, both as a student and then as a professional, you are taking on that question. You're saying that that question is interesting to you. Many library science folks are here because you were interested in reading and books and materials. Not all. And it was enough for you to go, but I want to know more about that than I know I like it, or I know I'm interested. I want to understand how to help or build it. Many of you in the information management world are here because you were in an organization or an operation that royally screwed up. And you want to know why. I mean, I've read the papers that you guys have written. They start with this asshole who was my manager. But to be nice, you did not use the asshole word, so, you know, that's not scholarly. Right? You wanted to know how to do it right. At the center of that question was, how is technology or information able to help it? So it's okay that we don't be able to give a definition of this is information. I can give you articles because great scholars have tried to figure this out. Patrick Wilson's talked about second-hand information. Buckland's talked about what is a document. People for 100 years have been working on this issue, and no one said, aha, we've done. Because the minute we say we're done, we're done. We've figured it out. And we're not there with information. So I'm going to talk about the field, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the evolution of the information field, and I'm going to do it in a very self-centered way. Actually, I guess it should be school-centered way. But part of what we're doing with 601 is preparing you for a culture of inquiry. And so you should know a little bit about where this culture came from. We're going to talk a lot about culture and such. In 1974, this man, Bob Taylor, background as a sports writer, worked in the intelligence field during World War II, was a director of a library, became the dean a few years before this here at the Syracuse University. Became the dean of the library school. And in 1974, he and the faculty changed this to the School of Information Studies. By the way, if you're wondering what the proper specific definition of information studies is, there's a reason they chose that term versus, say, information science, which was, we don't know. We're going to study it. So Bob Taylor and the faculty created the first information school here because Bob Taylor had to make a deal. And the deal he had to make was actually with his alumni and his current students, with librarians. And the deal was something like this. We've done a lot looking at a specific type of institution, a library. We've done a lot in the preparation of a specific type of professional, a librarian. But we now recognize that the tasks and what we've been learning and what we've been hearing are broader than any single institution, are broader than any single profession. We believe that information is the key to not only the future of libraries, but the keys to many, many industries, 1974. And the deal he made with the library community was, trust us. As we investigate this, as we broaden our focus, as we add information management and telecommunications and all of these things, what we learn will benefit this one institution called a library. I would argue that by 2007, when we tragically lost our previous dean, Ray Von Dran, we had fulfilled that promise. We had answered that question. Libraries had moved from places of books and materials in a single institution to digital domains, understanding how to connect information, understanding a broader sense of people and individuals and not just books. And at the same time, we'd succeeded because the promise that this information thing is broader than libraries was proven out. It's true in industry, it's true in government, it's true in not-for-profit, it's true in your personal life. It's true when I go over to my neighbor because I have to set up his wireless network. It's true when my mother calls on Christmas because she got a new TV and can't hook up the TV. When did we need tech support for a TV? This is wrong. Anyway, I digress. So what happened over this time span? What did we see happen and evolve in the information field? Well, we started in the world of libraries. But we quickly realized that computing was going to be essential to the information field. Now, you may say, yeah, but actually, if you look at computing in 1974, it was pretty big iron stuff handling business processes and statistics. Many people in the computing world didn't look at themselves as information professionals. They looked at themselves more as engineers, right? We look at the whole world of programmers. Programmers who understood punch cards and how to efficiently process things, the origins of multitasking and timeshare systems. Remember, in 1974, this stuff was really brand new. Yeah, all right, after World War II, we can tell that story of ENIAC and such, but 1974 is when it's starting to become affordable. When we're past IBM's claim that there were going to be 6 computers in the world. And we're starting to realize that maybe the number was more like 6 billion computers in the world, right? So we see the evolution to where suddenly people running the hardware realized that the hardware was less important than what they were running. We see an advent of information retrieval. If you were here 20 years ago, you would have had a course in information retrieval. You would have been hearing about Boolean. You would have been hearing about probabilistic retrieval systems versus brute force statistical systems versus natural language processing. We would have spent time in inverted index. It would have been an information retrieval orgy. It would have been thrilling. It's kind of like Caligula with a slide rule. Tell me it's not fun. Anyway, I'm getting myself in lots of trouble. Information retrieval, where information retrieval at the time was you went to a person who was an expert in information retrieval. You gave them your query. They either came up with the punch cards or sat there and typed a very arcane language in and then gave you the results. Why couldn't you search? Because it was like $5 a query. It was like $100 an hour, right? It was a scarce resource, and so we needed a priesthood of people that could do it. But this work led directly to the work on Google, on Bing, on web search engines. We see the advent of MIS, where now information system wasn't an engineering task, it wasn't a statistical crunching task, it was a management opportunity. It was the idea that we needed people who understood the business to be part of the computing world, not people in the computing world every so often running stuff for business. This gave rise to the notion of the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, where more and more corporations realized they were in the information business. Before, they were in the agriculture business. They were in the steel production business. They were in the transportation business. And now they're all beginning to realize that all of it relies on this nebulous, bizarro concept called information, and increasingly digital information. We jump ahead, and in the 90s we begin talking about convergence. In the late 80s and 90s, we suddenly see that computing and telecommunications become intimately intertwined. Now, saying that today is kind of ridiculous. It's like, But the smartphone idea is not where we started, right? We started with car phones. You remember car phones. Yeah, I mean, many of you don't actually remember car phones, but you've seen ridiculous YouTube videos with car phones. If you remember, Lethal Weapon, Danny Glover brought out his briefcase, which was his phone, right? And that was high tech. Telecommunications was how we talked to each other. Telecommunications was about telephones. Computing, that was over in computing. Computing was about rooms and air conditioning and punch cards and eventually obscure terminals. And something happened along the way, which is we realized that when all information becomes digital, all telecommunications becomes computing. And then we started linking our machines up to talk directly, and then all computing became telecommunications. I mean, if you got a new laptop today, the first thing you do with a new laptop is you open it up and you connect to the internet. That's not the way it used to be. You'd get a laptop, you'd open it up, you'd bring out your briefcase full of CDs, and you begin loading software on it. And then, whee, I can see a web page. Now, Apple's getting rid of the computer, right? You're going to buy your iPhone, you're going to buy your iPad. You don't need a computer. It comes up and it says, where's your internet connection? Because you can't do squat until I see it. Or if you have a Windows machine, you bring it up and it says, hi, you're in the middle of Times Square. Let me pop up unnecessary malware at you. Thank you very much. First thing it does, communicates everything it knows about you to the mothership, right? This is a really bizarre world, and it's one that we live in and we don't give a second thought to. But it's very different. Think about telecommunications without computing. How many of you text? How many of you make phone calls on a cell phone? How many of you people text more than make phone calls? About half. A little bit more. This is not unusual. This is the trend. All right? So then we get to the web. Now, the internet was actually around back here. But suddenly, the web did something very different. The web, and it wasn't just pretty pictures. The web, from a technical standpoint, saw this convergence, and it said, you know what? Separating out text from pictures, from video, we shouldn't do that anymore. The web became, built on an internet architecture, became a way of sending any information back and forth, added interactivity to that method, and suddenly we could share information in whole new ways. So that popped up and changed the world a little bit. And now the mobile web, where we can do this anywhere, anytime. And where we are today is that every field is an information field. Every field is an information field. One of my favorite stories. There is a gentleman living in rural Vermont who loved snowmobiles. Loved snowmobiles. He bought them, he fixed them, he bought broken ones, he bought parts, he bought all this stuff. And over his lifetime, by the time he was a grandfather, he had a barn filled with snowmobile parts. We all have to have a hobby. He had a grandson that went away to college. One summer break, the grandson came home, with the permission of the grandfather, took a digital camera and a laptop back into the barn, took a picture and inventoried every part and piece and snowmobile he had. Put it on the web with a $sign next to it, and overnight, this grandfather became a worldwide snowmobile parts distributor. Why? Because in Siberia and in Ukraine, and they had these huge 1960 snowmobiles, they couldn't find parts anymore, and suddenly this guy in Vermont could do it. He wasn't in the snowmobile business, he was doing it as a hobby, but because suddenly information and technology became available, it transformed what he did. In fact, you're going to hear one of the themes, not only of this course, but of the entire program, is around entrepreneurship and innovation. What we are increasingly realizing is that we are not in the jobs business. We don't create jobs. We allow people to monetize their passions. What? The snowmobile guy loves snowmobiles, and now he can make a living at it. Radically different idea. An individual who loves scrapbooking could suddenly scrapbook for people around the world, could turn that interest and artistic skill into a job. You guys are going to have a choice throughout this program. Do you want to get the J.P. Morgan Chase job? Do you want to get the library job, the public library job? Or do you want to make your own business, your own job, your own career? Now, that's always been, you've always been able to do it, but now we live in a field just because information lies at the heart of what we do, it's more and more an opportunity. What does Twitter make? Nothing. What does Facebook make? Your information sold to corporations. What does Google make? Nothing. Their entire industries, in fact, the largest growing industries in the world, make nothing. But they deal with information. This gooey, strange, bizarre substance. And so this is the field that you're now a part of. But it has some interesting challenges, which is as that field has evolved, we've ended up with some rather interesting behaviors. For example, what's happened over time is the rate of storage, the amount we can store, has changed dramatically, right? In 4000 BC, we get about 1 character per cubic inch. We made slate tablets, we sat there and we carved, and like, you know, the speed carvers could sit there and make a word. In 2800 BC, 250 characters per cubic inch, because now we were smoking the papyrus, right? 1450 AD, 500 characters per cubic inch. Thank you, Mr. Gutenberg. In 2000 AD, we get millions of characters per cubic inch. We call it, well, we used to call it iron and storage. Now it's flash media and flash storage. They're working on, did anyone see this one? It's a flexible gelatin substance with memory capacity. It's like memory jello. What happened to your term paper? I ate it. It was cherry. You know. At the same time, our ability, hey, do you guys, everyone hear Moore's Law? Anyone tell me what Moore's Law is? The cost of computing is either halved every 18 months or its capability is doubled every 18 months. Right? Those are two. And Moore, who was a guy at Intel, was more interested in the latter, which he could double the number of transistors on a circuit board every 18 months, and that effectively doubled computing power. So then you hear, your smartphone has more capability than what we use to send people to the moon. Yeah, but try and get your smartphone to the moon, right? Anyway. Moore's Law is amazingly consistent. It's the fact that you can now buy a computer that is twice as capable for the same amount of money as last year. And it's actually happening. Storage exceeds Moore's Law. We are actually able to create greater density in storage than every 18 months. It's more like every 9 months. It's why you're going to have a terabyte hard drive in your next computer as an option. It's why in 3 years you're going to have the ability to have multiple terabytes, and in 5 to 10 years you're going to have petabytes of storage in your smartphone. Right? It's scary. The idea that we used to have to worry about what to keep, and now it's like, where do we put the next hard drive? You know, 30 cents per gigabyte is pretty amazing. I don't know, you guys aren't probably old and cranky like me, but when they first started coming out with those little flash thumb drives, I used to buy them just because they were bigger. Oh my God, $50 for a 500 megabyte, I gotta have one. What are you gonna put on? I don't know. You walk in 2 weeks later, a gig for $90, I gotta have one. I bought 12 netbooks because they were so cheap. And it's like, what do you need 12 netbooks? I don't, but they're cheap. All right, at the same time that our storage has been going up, our rate of production has also gone up exponentially. In 4000 BC, we were able to produce about half character per second. 2800, we're up to 2 characters per second. By 1450, we were able to produce, basically through printing on paper, 3000 characters per second. And now to our high-capacity printers in the 1990s, 20,000 characters per second. And now we've really stopped counting because we're producing things digitally. All right? Our rate of transmission has gone up dramatically. This is the time required to send 250 words, 3,000 miles. All right? 490 BC took about 18 days. 1844, a little over 4 minutes. This was you get on a horse and ride. Here you go, do-do-do-do-do-do-do. In 1985, it took us less than 1,000th of a second over early networks. In 1990s, less than 1/1,000,000th of a second. We're talking about, you probably, if you bought a new machine, have a gigabit Ethernet card in it. Right? That's going to go up. We're talking about over wireless networks going faster and faster. I got someone who was testing out the first 4G, the LTE Verizon modems. When they hook it in their computer, they said, my God, they looked at their hotel was giving them something like 4 megabits per second. And they plugged in this wireless modem, and it was giving them 40 megabits per second. He said, good Lord, I can download people with this. Right? It's amazing. Now, here's the trick. Here's what sits at the center of the information field. This is the rate of human comprehension. 300 words per second, 300 words per second, 300 words per second, 300 words per second, 300 words per second. If you read articles talking about the human brain is evolving, it's crap. The human brain is adapting, but we're not evolving. We haven't sprung wings yet. I'm not an X-Man. I'm pissed off about that, but I move on. Right? The problem is we can't read faster. We can't read more. We can't. The wetware won't play our games. And now what's interesting is what if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, we would have said, anyone know the phrase? What are we heading for? Information overload. We don't talk about information overload anymore. No, seriously, we don't. If you read in the literature, you read in the popular press, no one talks about information overload anymore. This used to be the thing we were worried about, the thing that was going to crush the world. And now we sit there and go, I got Google. I got Facebook. Right? I mean, let's face it, if information overload were a problem, how many LOL Cats videos would you watch? Clearly, you've got spare time on your hands. Now, this has led to really interesting stuff. It's led to things like recently people talking about filter bubbles. The idea that when you search Google here today, and when you search Google when you go home on the exact same query, you may end up with different results by where you are. You may end up different results if you search Google sitting by someone searching Google on the same term because it knows about you. And we're talking about, can we exclude information? Are we setting up filters? We adapted. Facebook showed us a social adaptation to this. The fact that I don't have to listen to anyone, I can just listen to my friends. Right? That's an adaptation. That's a very different thing. And so what's interesting is I would love to say that we in the school are solely responsible for making sure that information overload wasn't a problem. And we actually did have a part to play. All the information schools did. But what we're realizing is that promise that Bob Taylor made to Ray Von Dran, which was, we're going to figure out this information thing, which was primarily a technology promise. We're going to figure out how technology can help us improve information processing, speed this, solve this problem. We're finding it's time for a new promise. And it's a new promise that you guys are going to help shape, that you're going to become part of. And that was a new promise that says, the way we deal with this problem is not better computing. It's a new compact that focuses on innovation, new ways of doing things that we never thought about before, and focuses really strongly around collaboration. In fact, if we wanted to be more accurate, we should rename ourselves from the I School to the C School, which is a collaboration school. Every professor you talk to, every researcher is in some way working on collaboration. Dave D has a project around the idea of fair health, which is making better information available around health insurance and healthcare plans. Is that all right? What he's doing is he's helping insurance companies, insurance consumers, and state regulators collaborate around more free, open, and valid information. Right? My stuff around librarianship is all around not people coming to a building for books, but coming to learn, and learning is a collaborative operation. Ian's done research on the economic gaming environments, which is a way of looking at the economics of collaboration and how to ease and speed collaboration. Marta talks about rules in telecommunications and how we set policy, which is rules of collaboration. Information, as this sort of nebulous jelly-like substance, is really the results of collaboration and is useless until it becomes knowledge, which is instituted in behavior. And behavior itself is created often around a social context. Right? How you learn, how you understand comes from things. I'm reading a great book. It's called Brain Bugs. And it's a neuroscientist who says this is how screwed up your brain is. And he gives some examples. Like, for example, ready? What do cows drink? First thought milk. Right? You've got two different memory systems in your brain. The first one goes, cows, milk, milk. And then there's this other part of your brain that goes, oh, you idiot, stop. Right? Well, the thing is that when you look at social context, your brain literally primes itself. So he's talking about priming, and the idea that if I say, for example, bread, your next word, if I said, what word follows bread? You might say butter. But that's if you're in the United States, where we put butter on our bread, where we eat it for breakfast. In other cultures where they put Vegemite on it, Vegemite might be the next word, or jelly might be the next word, or whatever it is. We use bread, we think of money. Bread and butter to us is how you earn your money. That's a cultural reference. So we have to understand this information thing is not some abstraction, little pure piece of information that falls on a delicate, neutral, unbiased piece of wetware that then gets utilized. We have to understand what world you work in, how you behave, how you know it, and how you collaborate. That's about information, and innovation is helping us do it better, faster. So this new compact talks about systems. In Bob Taylor's day, we used to talk about expert systems, or the systems view. And it went something like this. Here's you. You are the client. You interact with a system. The system consists of some sort of constraint, how fast it is, how much memory it is, how much you can store. Has a series of algorithms it uses to operate on a corpus. Think of it as a bunch of documents, because at the time, it was a bunch of documents. Right? And so we would have been studying not this at all. If you were in the information school in 1974, we were talking about systems, we would not even mention these people. They don't exist. We'd spend a lot of time down here. This is what your mainframe can do. This is what your storage system is. It is using an optical network. Right? And then, has anyone gone to Disney recently in Epcot? Oh, all right, never mind. They have the Spaceship Earth, that's the big dome. My son, my 8-year-old, loves it. And we go in, and my wife hates us going on that ride, because I sit there and correct it. You know, because they had Judi Dench talking about, you know, the idea that, and then man could create documents. And that's how we, and I said, it's a documentalist perspective. Anyway, all right. My 8-year-old's sitting there going, all right, so this is where we would have spent all our time. What Taylor and a series of affiliated and associated researchers said is you can't ignore that person. That's not a thing. That's not another system component. That's not another cog in the wheel. Right? The system crashes. User error. Please replace user. We don't do that. Now we talked about this not as a client or an abstraction, but this was a user. This was someone who was the ultimate guide of whether it was successful or not. All this stuff still sat there. But now, Taylor introduced this idea of a negotiation space. He said, if this system can't effectively negotiate with this user, this system is useless. Does this system save time? Does this system reduce noise? Does this system, is it effective? What's the value it adds to the system? We're now at a point of realizing that this isn't far enough. That we're really in a world of this. And even more so, in a world of this, which is, this isn't a user. You're not a user. You're not a customer. You're not a consumer. You're a participant. You shape the system. You build the system. You are the system, right? And not only are you accessing documents, but you're accessing community. Think about, for a minute, your phone. I don't care if it's an iPhone. I don't care if it's an Android phone. If it has an app store, the analogy works. Am I a user of this system? Sure, Dave, you use it. You didn't build it. I don't see your name on it. But think about it for a minute. What the App Store model did for the cell phone world is it suddenly said something very interesting is happening. When you pick the apps you put on this thing, when you decide if it's Angry Birds or the Microsoft Office emulator or it's, and let's face it, it's Angry Birds, you are doing something more than simply using this system. You're shaping it. If I hand you my phone and you hand me your phone, they're not the same experience. I sit there and go, where's Woot.com? I can't work anything without Woot.com. What do you take notes on? I use Notebook. Oh, God, no, you got to use Evernote. What the hell's wrong with you, right? Then you iPhone for a half an hour. I orchestrate this system. I may be the user of any one app, but I put the whole thing together. My telecommunications experience is me. I'm building the system around me. In Facebook, Facebook does 3 things. Well, 4 if you consider selling your private information to corporations. 3, right? It provides you a profile, a wall, and friends. That's it. The fact that you use Facebook to farm, the fact that you use Facebook to do, like, map the cities and find out if you're a millennial and, do hotdates.com or whatever, share your cat's picture, that's you. Once again, your Facebook world, your Facebook profile, your friends' world, you created that. Yes, Facebook provides you a platform, but you're creating it around you. You're a participant. You're an orchestrator. You're an organizer. And what you as information professionals, whether you're going to work in a library or a Fortune 500 company or a business, you now have to treat the folks who are your consumers very, very differently. Very differently. So the information field is coming to it. So I told you I wouldn't give you a definition of information. I lied. Information is ultimately power. It is the power to influence behavior and action, and positive change in behavior and actions is innovation, which you're going to hear about for the rest of the week. But it's power. Now, some in this audience don't like that word. That word, well, if you're librarians and you read my book, you've already heard this argument. But anyway, power. It is great power. Power is neither good nor evil, positive or negative, for-profit or not-for-profit. It is simply your ability to affect change. If you want to empower people, you want to empower your students in a K-12 setting, you want to empower your lawyers in a law firm to do better legal work, if you want to empower your government to improve the economy, you must first acquire power. And what's amazing is we live in an era where that power is not done through our real estate or what we can pull from the ground or how high a building we can send into the sky. It is done in what we can know. It is in knowledge. And that is a unique point in history where what we know equals the power that we have. And that leads to the opportunities that you are here to take advantage of. Why you are getting a master's degree to become an information professional. Why you will be an information professional, called a manager, called a CIO, called a librarian, called a teacher, I don't care, called a snowmobile enthusiast. The opportunities that you have by entering into this field are amazing. There are few fields, if any, where one can have a greater impact and where you have a greater responsibility. There is an excellent chance within 5 years, people in this audience will have access to a company's email system. You will be able to see every email transaction that goes back and forth in your company. That is power that can be mistreated, as we have seen very recently with voicemails and journalism. The power to go into a dead girl's voicemail system for the reporters came from this field and the skills we are going to give you. And if you walk out of here and you help them do that, we have failed. If you have the skills to do it and not the ethics to prevent you from doing it, we have failed. You have power in this. When someone comes, when a third grader comes into a school library and asks for what book to read, that is a point where you have an awesome responsibility. You may think it's, oh, here's Harry Potter, or here's a nice little book. But ultimately what you're doing is shaping how that child will grow. That is power through information. When you make a decision, you look at Enron as a company. Enron didn't make squat. They existed solely as a market for exchanging futures. They dealt solely with knowledge and information, and they misused and abused that power. Banking companies didn't use the computing, and they more or less took down the worldwide economy. That is power misused. You must leave this program, this day, every day of your life, you must understand that it is your obligation to change the world for the better. Not document it, not automate it. not spreadsheet the hell out of it, not compute it, to change it. You have chosen the way of changing it through information, through how we know things, who can know things, where we can move that. And that is an awesome opportunity and an awesome power that you will all take advantage of. But you must understand that as we devote time to your skills, as we devote time to the processes and methods, as we devote time to case studies and readings, there is always a whisper, always an imperative, always in every classroom you take, a reminder that you must do so carefully. You must do so for the betterment. Over these next year, year and a half, 2 years, you will think the hardest thing that you have to do is that assignment, figuring out a database, writing a paper, finding your way through RefWorks. You are wrong. The hardest thing you will have to do is to remind yourself through the midst of that pain and the late nights and the assignments and the grading, is to remind yourself that ultimately you have a job and a goal, and it goes above any assignment and any paycheck, and it is to make the world a better place. All right? All right. Thank you. We're going to a break, I believe. So, break.